I'm AJ Bianco from Podcast PD, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows in the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Coming up on episode 247 of the House of EdTech podcast, I'm going to talk a little bit more about generative AI in education. I've got some great recommendations to start the 24-25 school year, and the House of EdTech needs to undergo some renovations. Strike up the band. Welcome to the House of EdTech. My name is Chris Nessie. The House of EdTech launched in 2014, giving me the opportunity to speak with teachers, leaders, and creators so you can more effectively integrate technology, strengthen your pedagogy, and have more confidence in your classroom and school so you can make an impact. Get involved with the podcast by visiting my website, chrisnessie.com. Using technology isn't difficult, and this is where it begins. This is the House of EdTech. Yes, it is. And I'm very excited to have you joining me for another episode of the podcast. As I record this, am getting ready to embark on the journey that will be the 2024-2025 school year. And if you're listening to this when it comes out on September 1st, you will notice that it has been a little bit of time between episodes here on the podcast. And I'm going to address that later on in the episode. But the renovations are not why you tune in. You tune into this podcast because I talk about tips and tools and recommendations. And my last episode was a really fun episode, episode 246 with Tom Mullaney. And we talked about the harms of generative AI in education. And I've got some thoughts as I continue to reflect on that very topic. And then, like I said, I've got a bunch of recommendations for you in this episode. So I'm going to combine the recommendations and the featured content into one segment. And then I will talk about the renovations here inside the House of EdTech. So let's get to this episode's EdTech Thought. After my conversation with Tom Mullaney on episode 246, and again, that's the very last episode that I did, I want to share my reflection. Now, there's a lot of excitement around artificial intelligence and generative AI, and I think that should be something that is exciting. I strongly believe it has the potential to transform education in ways we've never seen before. But like any tool, it's important to approach it thoughtfully. We have to start by acknowledging the incredible potential that AI holds. As an educator, I am constantly looking for ways to streamline my work, save time, and enhance learning experiences for my students. I truly believe that AI can be a powerful ally in those efforts. I have been able to use AI, generative AI, to free up more time to engage directly with my students, provide more personalized feedback, and to continue and even sometimes more quickly develop creative lesson plans. AI has helped me analyze data more efficiently. It has helped me identify learning gaps that exist in my students. And it has even suggested some great ideas for differentiating for the students that I work with. However, as you and I embrace this technology, we do need to be mindful of the risks it brings, especially in terms of equity and access. One of the biggest concerns with AI in education is, of course, the digital divide. Not all schools have equal access to advanced technology, and this can create situations where the benefits of AI are only available to to the most well-resourced institutions. We need to ask ourselves, are we creating a new form of educational inequality where only some students have access to these advanced tools? True revolution in education through AI will only be possible if it's accessible to all students and teachers, regardless of their socioeconomic backgrounds. Another point that we need to consider is how generative AI is being used in educational practices. Again, listen to episode 246. Listen to the points that Tom makes. Go to chrisnessy.com/246, or I'll have a link to that is a swipe or a tap away where you're listening to this episode right now. There's a lot of talk about efficiency in AI and what it can bring to things like grading, for example. But here's the thing. When we rely too heavily on automation, we risk losing the nuance and the human touch that is critical in education. I did an episode before episode 246 that talked about using your brain, right? We need to be the humans that are interacting with artificial intelligence. It's just a tool. My hammer is a tool. The pen or pencil is a tool. Those things do nothing without us as humans interacting with them. AI systems lack the ability to understand cultural context, the unique voice, or even the creative expression that a student might bring to their work, or that you as a teacher might bring to your lesson planning. This is particularly concerning when it comes to things like grading essays or assessing student performance. We need to ensure that AI is augmenting our efforts, not replacing the critical human element that makes education so powerful. I've begun to augment my own grading. You can do that too. But I am still involved. I am not just throwing in essays and saying, here, ChatGPT, grade this. And I don't know why I started to turn into Kermit the Frog. So it can augment it. It shouldn't and can't replace us. It's also crucial that we question the systems and the algorithms behind the artificial intelligence. Who's coding the systems? What data are they being trained on? Are they reflective of the diverse student populations that we serve? Without careful consideration, we will be amplifying existing biases and further marginalizing students who are already underserved by our current systems. That being said, I don't want to discourage you from exploring AI in your classroom. I am a big proponent of it. I am doing it myself. You should know that I believe AI is a valuable tool if it's used wisely. The key is to approach it with your critical human eye. Don't just adopt AI and AI tools because it's hot right now. Take the time to understand how it works, who it serves, and how it can truly enhance learning for students. But to realize this potential, we must integrate AI thoughtfully, ensuring that it supports our educational goals rather than dictating them. AI in education is neither good nor bad. It's a tool, and like any tool, its value depends on how we use it. Let's be proactive in shaping the future of AI in our schools, ensuring that it enhances rather than diminishes the quality of education. Let's continue to be curious. Let's continue to question. Let's continue to innovate, all while keeping the needs of our students as the top most important priority. So as you explore AI in your teaching, I encourage you to do so with a balance of enthusiasm and some caution. Embrace the opportunities, but also remain vigilant about the challenges. Together, we can harness the power of AI to actually create more equitable, more engaging, and more effective learning experiences for our students. And that's my EdTech thought. Okay, let's get to the featured content for this episode. And I again am comboing the EdTech recommendations, plural, and the featured content because it is that great back-to-school time. So you are on the lookout for EdTech tools to start your school year. And if you're listening to this episode and it's not the start of the school year, don't worry, my friend. These tools will still be valuable. And as I go through these tools, when I transition from one tool to the next, you're going to hear this sound. So when you hear, that means I'm going to talk about a new tool. And if you miss a tool, don't worry. It's a podcast. You can rewind and re-listen. You can also tap on your screen where you're listening to this. Swipe or tap, and there'll be links to everything that I'm talking about. Or if you're in the car driving and it's not safe to swipe or tap, go to my website, chrisnesi.com/247. CHRISNESI.com, and everything will be there. By the way, it's always there. So let's get into it. First tool I want to talk about is Flashka. Flashka. This is an AI-driven tool that generates supplementary educational materials, which includes flashcards. But here's where Flashka is different. You upload a source PDF, perhaps a textbook PDF. Flashka can generate flashcards automatically. However, the real value of Flashka lies in its ability to serve as a comprehensive study partner, not just a flashcard generator. Now, is it completely free? No, so it's freemium. Flashka operates on a credit system, and it offers 50 free credits per day, which is sufficient for what they call daily study sessions. So, for example, asking for an explanation on a flashcard uses 1 credit. But Flashka isn't making up information. It is going to build flashcards and act as a tutor based on information it is given. So perhaps you have PDF files that you want your students to study from, or you've got a study guide. You can give your students that information as a PDF file, and you can show them how to use Flashka. This is a really cool thing. Did you know that you can do e-signatures in Google Docs? Yeah, you know how sometimes you get a PDF file and you can digitally sign that file? Well, you can do the same thing inside of Google Docs. You can send signature requests and sign documents with e-signature. With e-signature, you can create documents for signatures and send signature requests in Google Docs and Google Drive. To complete e-signature requests, signers can easily fill in the requested information. E-signature as a feature is available in Google Docs, but it's available to eligible workspace users. I'm going to include a link in the show notes, which are a swipe or a tap away, or chrisnesi.com/247. And it's a link to the Google support information about e-signatures, how you can use them, and you can get some detailed instructions. But maybe a use case for this, just off the top of my head, might be a permission slip form or media release forms. You know, kids love to bring back papers that are signed by their parents. Maybe if we just sent it directly to the parents via email, that might expedite the entire process. So check out e-signatures in Google Docs. Let's talk about fonts. I love fonts. Do you love fonts? So we know that within Google, there are hundreds of Google fonts, okay? But have you ever been designing a slideshow or putting together a document and you spend some time trying to figure out what fonts look good together? Well, check out fontpair.co, fontpar.co, and you can browse through hundreds of free Google font pairings to use on your next creative project. Definitely share this with your students because I've been teaching a long time and kids don't really understand fonts and graphic design and desktop publishing. So check out fontpair.co and enhance your next document today. Here's a really cool thing. This is called Vevox. At least that's how I'm going to pronounce it, which you can find at vevox.com. This is an interactive tool that creates quizzes and does live polling. You can also create anonymous Q&A sessions. You can also generate live word clouds, but it's based on what you give it. So for free, and again, Vevox is freemium, the free features include one user, so that would be you, but then you can obviously distribute things. You get unlimited basic multi-choice polling, quizzing, and Q&A. You can integrate it with Microsoft Teams and PowerPoint, but again, a lot of this can also be done web-based, and they do have some free online help and support. So if you're looking for a way to bring in some online quizzing, some polling, some Q&A into your classroom, you're doing checks for understanding, you might want to check out Vevox. And again, that's vevox.com. Let's talk about tweaking our lessons, and we're going to talk about Twee, twee.com, TWEE.com. And no, I did not thought I taught a putty tat. So, bad joke, classic Chris. All right, this will allow us to create questions for any YouTube video in just seconds. You can generate dialogues, stories, letters, or articles on any topic for any level. You can also quickly create multiple choice questions, open questions, and true-false statements. You can find interesting disgusting? Maybe you want to do disgusting questions, but more often than not, you're going to use discussion questions. You can find interesting facts, quotes by famous people related to the topic, and you can brainstorm vocabulary related to the topic and create fill in the gap and open-ended exercises. Twee offers a free forever plan that allows you to do 20 runs per month for the text tools, 10 runs per month for the media tools, and you can, you'll have a limit of 5 minutes for input on the media that you give it. But Twee will allow you to, again, create questions based on YouTube video content. So if you integrate and use a lot of video in your classroom, this might be a tool to help you brainstorm some content or help you out if you're in a pinch. And that's, again, twee.com, TWEE.com. The last thing I want to talk about for recommendations and EdTech in this episode is the website whatcanAIdotoday.com. So over the last couple of years, I've talked a lot about AI. I've recommended AI tools. You are probably listening to other podcasts or seeing people on TikTok or Twitter or Instagram or Facebook groups talking about all these different AI tools, and you might feel overwhelmed. Well, if you go to whataicandotoday.com, you can basically tell this website, here's what I'm looking to do, and it will recommend any number of AI tools that could potentially help you with that task. That's the simplest way that I can describe it. So make sure you check out whataicandotoday.com. As I mentioned at the top of this episode, it's time to do a little renovation on the House of EdTech. So I want to do a little bit of a House of EdTech reset. Now, if you're listening to this, you are what I would consider to be a loyal listener. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for making time to hear what I share, or whether it's me or when I have a guest here on the podcast. You may have noticed that the real time that elapsed between episode 246 and this episode, well, that was not intentional at first. I usually only take one intentional break with this podcast, and that's done at the end of the calendar year, after I do the House of EdTech Smackdown, before I come back in January with new content. That's usually, a 3-week break that I take. The time between episode 246 and this one in real time is the longest I've gone without producing an episode of this show prior to when the show didn't exist and there were no House of EdTechs. Honestly, I was not motivated. And after a couple of weeks, I made the decision to not just put out something I wasn't proud of just for the sake of publishing an episode. The podcast was certainly on my mind, but I've spent more time over the last couple of months truly wondering if I should continue this podcast. I rarely get feedback, even though I ask for feedback in each episode, and elements of the show just haven't worked. The just give it a try segment, I think that's a bust. That's a whole segment that revolves and depends on a listener, maybe like yourself, telling me something that you have tried that either worked or didn't work, and we can share those stories on the episode. I don't get responses to that. Even when I promote and have requested people in the past to do that. My Discord community, it's on life support, and I spend more time turning away bots from my GroupMe texting group than I do communicating with the listeners who are a part of it. Even the end of the year House of EdTech Smackdown has been shrinking as the years have gone on. I remember that first year in 2014, there must have been 35 entries. And I think last year I was happy to have 5 or 6. Now, as a content creator, that can wear on you to wonder if the content you're making is making a difference. I've always said that I create this podcast first and foremost for me, and that I am learner zero, and that I would produce this podcast even if nobody else listened. I'm going to be honest. My view on that has changed over time. You see, I spend a lot of time learning about content creation and podcasting. I love this medium. And so much of what I have learned and continue to learn about podcasting and creating content is that the audience is crucial to the success of the podcast. There are so many things I wish I could do with this podcast, but I honestly don't know if those things are worth the time and energy when it feels like so much of the people who listen and make up this audience just aren't engaged beyond downloading the episodes. Now, I appreciate the downloads that this show gets, but there is a reason that this very piece is at the end and not the beginning of the episode. Only the most dedicated listeners like you are getting this, and I am honestly too scared to put something like this at the beginning of the episode, even though I would like the person who stopped listening a while ago to really hear this. I appreciate people like my awesome supporters, and I'm not going to hold back here. Statistically speaking, I should have more people supporting the show, and when I see that I ask people if, you're getting value from the show, statistically, more people should be willing to support and give back whatever they can do, whether it's sharing the episode or becoming an awesome supporter. I would love more people to get involved with the community that I have been trying to build. So what does this all mean? Well, in my journey as a content creator, I have, of course, gotten into the teachings of Gary Vaynerchuk, or Gary V, as you may know. And something he says a lot is that the market will tell you if your content is good. I feel like the market over the last couple of years is saying, "You're wasting your time, Chris. Stop." I see other people who have built empires around topics that I think are ridiculous. I don't have it in me to go down that road. I don't have a clever gimmick. I don't have anything to sell. Unless you're interested in buying my book about podcasting. There will be a link in the show notes. Oh, by the way, I like to podcast and you will too. A House of EdTech Guide to Podcasting just turned 1 year old. 1 year old? Just turned one earlier in August here in 2024. I have proudly sold like 10 or 11 copies in the last year. I didn't think I would sell any. And this is coming from someone who never thought that they would write a book. But there's that pesky market telling me that the topic of my book isn't valuable or needed. I know this really ends the episode on a down note, but I pride myself on being honest. And if you've listened this far, then I really feel comfortable being this open with you. Now, when I talk about the House of EdTech undergoing renovations, okay, here's what I'm doing that's really going to change things up a bit. For now, here in September of 2024, I am not going to be producing the podcast every 2 weeks. What I'm going to do is switch to a release schedule where I will produce episodes when I am inspired and really have something to say, or I have a guest and I've got a great conversation to bring to you. So I am not going to force House of EdTech on the world. And I think that over the last 10 years, I've been excited to force House of EdTech on the world. But again, for now, I am going to give you the House of EdTech when I'm inspired to do so. And that can change in the future. It's a podcast. I could change my mind in 2 weeks. I will keep you posted. I have respect for you because you are a listener of the show. And if you've got questions, if you've got feedback, I'll talk about all that in just a second. But that's where I am at as I get ready to start another school year, teaching high school history, teaching university courses in communication and leadership and all those different things that I am involved with. House of EdTech has a special place in my heart. It's not going away, but it will be here when it needs to be. I want to thank you for listening to the House of EdTech. If you haven't already, please subscribe or follow this podcast where you're listening so that you can make the show part of your anytime, anywhere professional development. Links and resources for everything I talked about in this episode can be found on my website. Go specifically to chrisnessy.com/247. I, of course, want to hear from you. I value your feedback and your perspective. And I shared some perspective in this episode. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have thoughts or questions about any of the tools I shared or some of the things I shared here at the end of the episode, or any other EdTech related topic. You can email me, feedback@chrisnessy.com, or you can leave a voicemail at chrisnessy.com/voicemail. Because this is a podcast, I would love to hear your voice, and I can't wait to connect. I encourage you to share the podcast with another educator who would get value from what I share. Spread the word, because I do want to reach as many educators as possible, and I thank you in advance. Lastly, I invite you to consider becoming an awesome supporter if you're getting value from my content. What is this worth to you? I am incredibly grateful for the ongoing support from the following people: Leo Calbush, my man, Leo in Brazil. Brian Carpenter. I love it when he does his recaps and talks about House of EdTech on his morning walks when he gets his fresh air at 5. By the way, that's the name of his podcast. You should subscribe to that one as well. Thank you to Aaron Cummings, Jeff Herb, my OG awesome supporter who has been with me for, over 200 episodes. Thank you, Jeff, for continuing to get value from and support what I'm doing here. Peggy George, the incomparable Peggy George, thank you so much for your support. And of course, Ditch That Textbook's very own Matt Miller. Keep up with what Matt is doing. Matt spent time in the classroom earlier this year. Now he's back out on the road. If you've gotten value from the podcast and you want to become an awesome supporter, go to chrisnessy.com/awesome. The next episode of the podcast will be episode number 248. Until next time, thank you for learning with me, and remember, using technology isn't difficult. Just give it a try.